Cousin falsely accused me of sexual assault, family cut me off. Now she's dying, admitted the truth, but they still want me to stay silent. Let's call her Jade. My cousin wrongfully accused me of sexual assault, when I was 18. Sadly, my family thought her narrative true. 4 years older than me, Jade and I were close growing up, but finally we drifted away. She is the daughter of my uncle, who was a single father, younger brother of mom. After his ex-wife became pregnant, my uncle married young. Unfortunately, she cheated on him, and their marriage broke up a few years later. She tried to keep in touch with Jade for a few years, but finally moved away with her new partner and they never got back in touch. Respectable man, my uncle always battled obstacles on his own and refused assistance. After his divorce, he never sought another major relationship. He devoted his life to parenting Jade. He even built a college fund for Jade, but after she turned 18 he told her that although he had done all in his ability to help her, she was now on her own financially as he had to consider his retirement. Although Jade disagreed, I thought that was reasonable. If she wanted to keep on her studies, she should pay for them herself. Many arguments between her and her father resulted from her believing he should support her studies for as long as she desired. Jade thus visited my family a lot of times. She would come over to rant to my mom following every disagreement with her father. Although I personally felt my uncle was reasonable, I kept my thoughts to myself as Jade would visit to speak with my mother and not me. As she usually did, Jade came up to our house one day without warning. I was the only one in the house. My parents were away. Expecting her to go, I'd told Jade that my mother decided to stay in the living room since she needed some time away from her father following another dispute. To be honest, I wasn't interested in hearing it again as she used to vent quite loudly to my mother and I had heard enough about her battles with her father. Jade began venting to me since my mother was not here. Though I had rather different ideas on the topic, I could see she expected me to be as empathetic as my mother. I cut her off when she once more started grumbling about her father. Although my mother might have agreed with her points of view, I felt my uncle was acting rather sensibly. He had spent his whole life raising her to be a competent and capable independent lady, I told her. Now it was her chance to show him right. If she truly wanted to pursue a master's degree or perhaps a doctorate, she would have to do what everyone else does and pay for it herself. She majored in STEM, hence I knew that whatever job she finally landed would be sufficient to cover her expenses. She had just to at least try. She insisted though, that she couldn't work and study at the same time and that she would find it too much to manage. I advised her maybe she should give up on further study if she already decided it was difficult for her to work while she was still in school. It was unjust to demand her father keep paying for everything, especially after he had already done so much for her, and she was treating him like the villain instead of being appreciative, I said. She quite obviously hadn't anticipated that reality check. She started screaming at me and calling me a vile human being as soon as I said all of this. She said I was a pampered brat who didn't deserve the support I received, hence I would never be able to relate what she was experiencing. Though I stayed quiet, to be honest I felt she was more of a pampered brat than I was. She screamed at me for a few minutes then fled the house sobbing. I avoided her since, as I mentioned, I had no interest in hearing her grievances over and over again. The sequence of events surprised me as well. My whole life collapsed the next day when she accused me of One accusation turned everything around. After 3 years of quiet from my family, folks are at last learning she had lied. My parents woke me early the day after Jade and I argued, stating that my uncle and Jade were here to visit me, and it was reportedly rather vital. I had no idea what was going on, but when I got downstairs Jade started shouting, accusing me of the night before and acting as though she was breaking down. My parents were equally startled, and my uncle seemed really worried. Jade was acting as though she were not even in a state fit for communication. Most of the speaking came from my uncle. He said that following her confrontation with him, Jade had been inconsolable when she had returned home the day before. She eventually informed him I had lured her in and carried out the conduct she was now accusing me of when my parents were not home. Not even my uncle could look at me, and my parents avoided eye contact as well. None listened when I tried to object and assert my innocence. It was appalling. People already treated me like a criminal even though I had done nothing. My parents begged my uncle for pardon right in front of me, asking him not to publicly disclose the allegation or report me. They claimed they will do all necessary to resolve the matter. Whether I cried out or not, my uncle and dad totally turned away from me. It was so annoying that I grabbed a vase and tossed it against the wall in an attempt to get their eye. That backfired regrettably. My dad lost his cool, grabbed my arm, and hauled me to my room, closing me within. There was no way I could let Jade get away with this, hence I kept hammering against the door until my hands and arms started hurting. Telling such a big lie may have destroyed my reputation. Sadly, my dad allowed me out of the room only when my uncle and Jade left. I started crying right away as he opened the door and tried to explain to them he hadn't done anything, but they informed me they had seen security footage from the cameras outside our house. Jade had come over the previous evening, they noted, and had left the house crying a few minutes later. They decided to trust her based on her tear-filled fleeing. They told me they were embarrassed of the kind of son Jade had produced and that she had no reason to lie about what had transpired. While my mother was crying and unable to even talk, my dad assured me that, with great persuasion, they had persuaded my uncle and Jade not to file lawsuits. They were obliged to pledge something in return though. To spare her from seeing me and revisiting the horrific event, Jade and my uncle insisted that I be taken far away. After much debate, my dad decided to send me to live with my great-uncle somewhere far from the family. With his bad attitude and anger problems, this great-uncle was the least liked family member. Though he said it was the only fix, my dad knew I hated him. Not only was I being sent away, but they also told Jade that to keep things quiet, they were going to take my college fund and give it to her. I tried to complain, but there was no communication with them. Finally, I gave up as I no longer saw the need. Not even my own folks trusted me. Since her own father would never accept financial help from anyone, including his own family, I understood that Jade had most likely accused me unjustly only to control my parents and extract money out of them. After that episode, a few days later I was ready to go and packed. Neither my parents bothered to say goodbye or give me a hug. They kept me under house arrest by posing as I wasn't even at home for the following few days. My phone was taken away and I was not let said farewell to any of my friends. They cautioned me that they would destroy my life personally should I fail to get off the grid and vanish from everyone's lives. A falsehood Jade had uttered drove me to distance from everything I knew and cut relationships with everyone from my past. My great-uncle showed in a few days following that to pick me up, and I was sent off to live with him in what felt like an exile. Not one person from my past has contacted me since then, not even my friends or family. I had to totally start again in my life. It was quite challenging to fit in with my great-uncle when I initially moved in. Throughout the day he taunted me nonstop even though he had no idea why I had been sent out. Though he had no idea why I had been sent out, he would harass me nonstop during the day. He would hold it against me and tease me about it based just on my being kicked out. I had to walk on eggshells around him as he had a bad attitude and rage problems as I've noted. Though I knew my parents were paying him money every month, he still acted as though he was doing me a great favor by allowing me to stay with him. After the first few weeks, I understood there was no use to weep over lost milk. I knew I couldn't live with him indefinitely. My parents had cut me off and forbade me from interacting with anybody from my former life. I resolved to start looking for work as all I could do was maximize the circumstances. Not even could I go to college. I had been let into the college of my choice, but I lacked the resources to pay for attendance. Following several weeks of moping about and a few interviews, I at last landed a job as a warehouse worker. Although the work paid little and was physically demanding, at least with my first pay I could leave the house owned by my great-uncle. I had the good fortune to have a few colleagues around my age who were likewise having financial difficulties. The three of us decided to chip in and share an apartment and grew close friends. I knew my great-uncle would consider it a good riddance, so I didn't even bother telling him when I moved out of his house. Never heard from any of my family members once I moved out. I have been living with the same folks I found my first apartment with for the past 3 years. Every one of us has been quite fortunate. After a few months of working in the warehouse, all three of us resolved to keep searching for better prospects as the work was quite physically demanding. We all aspire to eventually go to college, hence throughout the past 3 years we have switched jobs and worked to save some money. I'm making a good salary currently working in sales. I have been considering applying once more to universities. My two buddies are doing great as well. We recently moved into a larger apartment in a far better area. Naturally, my family believes it's the ideal time to attempt and come back into my life now that things are beginning to show promise for me. I was pretty taken aback when my dad contacted me by email a few days ago since, as I indicated, I hadn't spoken with them in 3 years. Since it was one of the rules my parents made when they kicked me out and I had been anxious about them disseminating the truth and tarnishing my name, I am not active on social media. I so stayed to the guidelines. Though they never tried to get in touch with me, my email address has not changed in 3 years and I never banned them anywhere. Reading the email, it was essentially an apology for all that had transpired over the preceding 3 years. To enable his correct outreach to me, my dad required my address and contact details. In case I wished to get in touch on my own time, he also included his personal contact details. Jade had at last chosen to disclose the truth about what actually transpired, Thus his apology and the abrupt attempt at reconciliation sprang from it. She was dying and, I suppose, had at last acquired a conscience or something. She informed her father the truth for whatever reason, and he talked with my parents. My parents chose to get back in touch with me once they knew the truth. Regarding Jade, her pancreatic cancer diagnosis makes it quite improbable she will survive. She has been suffering for the past 8 months. Her health is just getting worse even with continuous medication. Ironically, she couldn't even make decent use of the money from my education fund. She squatted all the money on bad life decisions after screwing me off. She chose to take a gap year with all that money and tour the globe to expand her horizons and find herself instead of working toward her master's degree. Wanting to live luxuriously, she had already spent more than half of her savings when she returned roughly 1.5 years earlier. She came back with very little left and began pestering my parents for more. If she stole any more money from my parents though, my uncle threatened to cut her off. She thus gave up on the concept of schooling since she lacked enough money left to afford a master's degree without working and since working was something she refused to do. She still had some money left, but she kept her careless way of life instead of using it sensibly or trying to increase capital. She was already somewhat spoiled and lethargic from her year-long holiday. Despite not even seeking a job, she ultimately wasted more money purchasing an apartment and living above her means. She landed a job around a year ago, but she had to quit shortly after learning she had cancer. She now needs the money, hence she has to sell her flat and all else she purchased. Although I don't want to come across as callous, after learning what had happened to her I couldn't help but feel some gratification. She was her own worst enemy, so she had no enemies. After I closed the email from my dad, I had to consider whether or not I wanted to contact my parents again. I decided to talk to my friends about it, which also meant I at last had to tell them the truth about why my parents had kicked me out. I had simply informed them that we argued. Up until then, I had not disclosed the actual cause. Email later, I at last opened it to my buddies. I told them everything about Jade, how she had lied and thrown me under the bus, and how my parents had thought her over me. They not only drove me to live with the worst relatives conceivable but also had me cut everyone from my past off and threatened to destroy my reputation should I go against them. The truth I was imparting to my companions hardly seemed possible. They urged me not to contact my parents after I was done. They claimed they wouldn't pardon my parents either, if they were in my place. Since these are my closest friends and at this time they are essentially the only ones I have, I pay great attention to their advice. It's not only that they advised me to let go and avoid running across my parents again. They also advised me to talk about what happened to me. Though I did nothing illegal, I have been living in anxiety for the past 3 years. They are right, my parents choose to believe someone lied about me, hence I had to give up so much of my life. I have to talk if I want to take back my life. I told my parents I intended to reveal the actual account of events before I went public. People have a right to know the truth. So it makes no difference whether Jade is lying on deathbed. She destroyed my life. Today it is my chance to recover it. I thus texted the number my dad had supplied me and informed him exactly what I was going to do. The screenshots of the email my dad sent me already proved Jade had been lying. I could thus post the truth on social media immediately. Forget about just blogging, I may at last have social media once more. Though I suppose he misinterpreted the circumstances, I wasn't asking my dad for approval. Now he and my mother, together with my uncle, are blowing my phone and asking me not to do this. They contend that Jade has already gone through a lot, is suffering more than she has ever done, and has gotten her karma. They say I need not discipline her going forward. They are requesting me not to reveal the facts in public since it will damage Jade's reputation. Without saying why I left in the first place, they seem to believe I can come back into their life and resume what I left behind. In a sense, they are correct, no one will probably challenge it. Though I could, I do not think I want to. Jade stole a great portion of my life and even my friends find it quite reasonable for me to share the truth. It is about people knowing what actually happened, not about exacting revenge against her. Besides, there are few logical reasons for missing 3 years from everyone's life and then showing up again without a word. I'm happy enough here, so I don't even intend to return to the city. Yet I do miss some of my relatives and friends who treated me well. They should, at least, be entitled to know the truth. The only thing keeping me from posting is the constant calls and texts from my parents and uncle. They almost have been begging me not to go public. Jade seems to be in quite poor form. What then would happen if I went ahead and revealed to my cousin, even if she is on deathbed, the truth of why I had to leave everything behind for 3 years? Update 1. I finished it, lads. I considered it for a long time, repeatedly asked friends, and they all advised the same thing. Though I hadn't done anything, Jade and her family had taken away 3 years of my life that I could have spent properly, and I had to live in fear because of them. Whether or not Jade is in condition, it would be quite legitimate for me to exact retribution. Many of the responses on this reflected the same viewpoint. Ultimately, it was my choice at the finish. Knowing most people would support me helped me to feel much better. My first post was a week ago, and last night I finally posted a narrative of everything that has transpired in my life together with an explanation for my 3-year absence from the net. Friends, relatives, everyone who knew me, have contracted out to let me know they are here for me and have sorely missed me. I trust them as I had several communications from folks over the first few months after I vanished. Apparently, my parents advised everyone not to search for me after that, saying I wanted to be left alone since I had gone through something horrific and needed time and space to recover. People thus stopped trying to get in after the first few months, believing they were honoring my choices. My friends informed me they had repeatedly asked my parents where I was, but my parents never told them so they couldn't get in touch with me. Even many of my family claimed to have waited patiently for me to come back. Seeing how ready everyone was to welcome me back and how none had forgotten me made me somewhat cry. Most importantly, people have claimed that they always regarded Jade to be shady. Nonetheless, what she did was low, even by her standards. My mom and uncle haven't said anything thus far. I hope they stay out of it as I truly don't want to talk to them. Regarding myself, having all of this off my mind makes me feel a lot more free. Speaking up about what happened was wise. I have no regrets about anything. Update 2. I posted it some few days ago, and yesterday my folks got in touch with me. Having only asked one thing, that I let sleeping dogs lie, they informed me they were quite let down in me. They wanted me to come up with a reason for my 3-year absence, but not tell everyone the truth about what happened since they think Jade deserves peace and quiet in her present state. After my post apparently, Jade has lost almost all of her friends and even family members are no longer eager to talk to her. They seem to be blaming me. It's startling that they still provide more concern for what Jade is going through than for their own son's experiences. I told them I no longer bothered about their displeasure. An apology will never be sufficient. They let me down on several levels, and today they have no right to demand anything from me. I could say the same thing about myself if they believe Jade should have peace and quiet only because she is cancer-ridden. I was just 18 when they booted me out and forced me to live with my nasty great uncle. They showed no pity or forgiveness for me. I at least am speaking the truth. Jade lies, and she got away for 3 years. I'm going to take back my life now, and I'm not going to let anyone attempt and cause me shame about it. I advise them not to get in touch with me ever again and that their only cause of disappointment should be themselves. Then I finally blocked them. Something I should have done long ago, but I was confused and afraid. Speaking up about what has occurred to me though, has helped me to find closure and today I am not under pressure to deal with my parents. For all I care, they and their expectations can go for a hike. Update 3. Hey, after 3 hard years this weekend, I finally chose to see my friends and relatives. It turned out to be rather the finest choice I have ever taken. Along with me, more for moral support than anything else, were my housemates. To be honest, they have gotten so close that we are now like brothers and I wanted them to see my buddies too. Everyone has been getting along fantastic. My buddies were happy to see me. Since they all were outraged when I mentioned I was planning to stay in a hotel, I am actually living with one of them right now. Though I'm returning in a few days, my heart is simply so happy that I cannot even put it into words. We are spending our time of life living together in one of my friends' residences among my roommates and old buddies. I have also visited quite a few of my relatives, who have informed me they have cut off my mom, uncle and Jade. They never intend to be involved with them ever once more. At the end of the day, people will always stand for what is right, which makes me rather glad. Having individuals around who love me more than my parents ever did makes me happy as they did not forget me. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.